Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week I have the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing someone important, insightful or entertaining from the industry, and this week is no different. I have Sanjib Bose, who is Marketing Director for Southeast Asia for Kellogg. I was introduced by Sanjib by the team at the Future Conference. It's great to have you on the podcast.
My pleasure, Tom.
So for people who are listening to this podcast who don't know who you are and who are familiar with your work, could you please give us an introduction to who you are and how you do what you do?
Sure. Once again, thanks, Tom, for getting me on the podcast. I work in the Kellogg Company as Marketing Director for Southeast Asia, which is primarily the ASEAN countries. Been with the organization for a little more than 7 years. It's been a wonderful ride. I've been all along in the marketing function for Kellogg's. Prior to that, I used to work for an organization called GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare and spend an equal amount of time there. So it's been a great journey working in two of this wonderful organization, working across sales and marketing. And finally, I have the privilege of leading the marketing team in Southeast Asia for Kellogg Company. Apart from marketing, my interest lies in watching movies across the world and running over the weekend. And of late, I have ran a few marathons, last one being the Singapore full marathon. So those are the things that sums up me as an individual.
Well, I think it's a little early in the podcast to be showing off about your incredible physical prowess, but I had no idea about that. Congratulations. So let's go into the getting to know you questions. So in terms of your successful career, what have been the best investments of your time, your energy, or your money?
Success or not, I would say I think I'm lucky to have come the journey that I have. But if I look at really the best investment in time and energy that I would have spent across all along my career, I would say the time, the effort that I spent in understanding the consumers and shoppers through the multiple in-home visits, the immersions and the trade visits. I really get my energy when I am out in the market, when meeting consumers and shoppers. And at the same time, also meeting our business partners, which is distributors and retailers. These human interactions really energize me, but at the same time, they also provide me with a lot of learning. And I've been, I think, because of my grooming in the earlier organization, I think the initial days as an intern or a management trainee, it was all about being in the market, gathering the knowledge and understanding why does the consumer prefer a brand, what factors matter at the shop floor, be it from a logistics or an operations point of view, or for the shopper, why are they choosing a certain product over other. So I think those are the ones that have really, really helped me, shape my belief, my understanding, and my knowledge. And I actually think that those are my guiding forces. And when I make certain decisions today, today when I sit down here, and I think sometimes it's not always possible to really be out in the market with the same frequency that I would have done as an intern or a management trainee. But I really feel those are the interactions that provide me, real deep insights about consumers and shoppers that really help me guide a lot of business decisions that we make today. And most importantly, I think more than that is meeting with our business partners, because they're really closest to the reality. They give you the insights that are very sharp and that are very actionable. Having said that, I think in today's world, it is also very important to also take advantage of the newer technologies like AI. But I think it also needs to be married with those interpersonal relations and interpersonal connections. So all I can say is, currently, these visits help me stay close to my ground realities, but I think the cumulative amount of time that I would have spent with consumers across Asia and Africa is, I believe, a lifelong investment, for me as a marketeer and for a business professional.
So in all of those different interactions with consumers as shoppers or your business partners. Can you think of the most shocking or surprising interaction that you had with someone that you weren't expecting?
That's a very good question, Tom. I think this was about a decade back, and I was actually in one of the consumer visits in India for a certain, it was not really a product related, it was more consumer understanding and a consumer ethnography. And I got an amazing insight about what does health mean for consumers. And when I was probing and trying to understand about what does it look for from a forward-looking health benefit, he actually brought me down and said, for me, the biggest health benefit is when I find food in a package, in a great packaging. So it took me by a shock, and I was like, for me, because for me as a consumer, as an individual, it was basic. But for him, because he was moving from a lower socioeconomic strata to was just about entering middle class, for him it was a journey from unsafe, unhygienic food to getting access to a packaged food for him it was very healthy. It was very suddenly the entire understanding of health food changed for me. That and actually that was again became a very guiding principle for me, just not to assume things and to really go and meet consumers at multiple levels to understand what do they mean when they are looking for health, when they're looking for hygiene, how do those factors matter as you go across socioeconomic strata and based on the people's realities. It was quite eye-opening, but at the same time, I would say it was very humbling as a human being to understand how privileged most of us are.
So if you were going to give advice to someone who worked at a brand on how best to meet consumers in the kind of shopping environment or meeting business partners, how would you best advise them to do that in a way that they don't get biased or influence data from them?
I would say when you meet any one of these people, meet them as you're their friend. When you meet a friend of yours, you are not biased. You go there with an open heart to listen. You generally go there with not an agenda, but really to meet up with someone and try to bond and connect. And I think that would be my advice. It's a very human relationship because I think the other person also understands when you're talking to him as an individual, as a human being, or you're talking with a motive to gain something. So I think the insights come out of the conversation, but they don't come out of a questionnaire per se. I don't know if that was very clear, Tom.
Yeah, that was really clear. Thank you. So in the last 5 years or so, which new belief or behavior has improved the quality of your work life?
That's a great question, Tom, because it also talks about, I would say, a bit of my journey as we all go through as a career, and you try to cross those 5, 10, 15 milestones. And I think one of the things that stood out for me, and I don't know exactly 5 years or so, but I think over the last few stints of mine is, and it actually goes back to the last question that you asked, is understanding people first to succeed in business and in life. I think be it our consumers, our customers, business partners, in fact, even our teams whom we lead or whom we are a part of, I think we're all people first before we put a tag on them as, hey, this is a shopper, this is a consumer. And I think it's very important to understand the time, their aspiration, their difficulties, their beliefs, their values, their cultures, and what makes them happy. If you really want to, really go to the core of developing a relationship through which you succeed. So, and I think this understanding comes from multiple data points, but you also need to look at them with empathy. So I think it's very relevant in today's time as we are having access to multiple data points and data lakes through which we can, and technologies which is helping us to unearth those insights. I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to look beyond algorithm. We need to look with empathy. And that is the fundamental thing about having people first. So when I look at that, I think that helps me marry. So when I look at those data that comes out of a lot of secondary researches or from the analytical tools that we have today, somewhere I bring the human being into the table and say, if I'm a human being and if I try to understand as people first, how will I make sense of this data? And therefore, that helps me understand the consumer choices at different levels of ACC, as I just said, or how to drive engagement in my team, which can therefore be a great marketing team that develops great marketing communication. Or when I out with my business partners, talking about next year's plans and striking a deal, it also helps me understand them first as a people first. So the fundamental thing is reacting with empathy, is dealing people with empathy is very, very important. And I think that is one of my biggest belief that I would have formed in the last 5 years that have helped me evolve as a marketeer, but most importantly as a human being.
So I find this quite a difficult topic in some regards, because in my entire career, often people have said you should put the consumer at the heart of your marketing. And I think you go a step further and say you should be truly empathetic. However, two things. The first thing is, even the brands who do this really well still have to measure the performance of that brand. And the measurements we use to track performance don't really track the subtleties of something as complex as empathy. So how do you deal with the gulf between wanting to empathize and understand and put your consumer at the center of everything you do, or your team, or your suppliers, or the people you do deals with, and how do you cross the gap between that, yet the very numerical nature of the industry that requires quite often a cost per something, or a number of likes, or amount of emails, or views, or view through rates? So how do you deal with the gulf between the emotional complexity of this belief that I agree with and the reality of having to report performance?
That's a great argument, Tom. And I think the thing is, when I say people first, I'm not saying we disregard the performance matrices. We disregard the fundamental purpose of our business, which is delivering value. But I think what I say is, as we need to track our performance, we need to track. But before that, I think when we are developing our campaigns, when we are developing our products, are we looking at people as people first and understanding their aspirations, their values, their needs, is where the starting point is. So I think it's a little beyond. So it is before measurement. It is almost at the design stage, is when you're designing with empathy in mind. And then obviously once you design that, the performance matrices will be done analytically. You cannot put empathy, you cannot be sympathetic towards that. But I think it's empathy at the design stage, when you're designing a product or a campaign, is when you're putting people first.
So moving on. So whenever I do this podcast, I always set out the questions beforehand and let the guests choose. And you've chosen a question that almost no one has ever chosen before, which is, what are the bad recommendations that you hear in your profession?
The reason I chose this one was, this is, I think, one of the things, and let me give I think, be it our lot of partners with whom we work, or most of the times you would come when someone makes a presentation, a key thing that would say is, hey, this is what your competition is doing, right? And I think we have an obsession with what's happening with competition, be it promotions, be it packaging, be it communication, or be it tools they're using. So I think it's very important to be aware about what's the competitive scenario. But I think it's also very important to look at the bigger picture of what is driving consumer choices and adoption, right? And then we need to therefore make what is good for us as a business, or what is good for my brand, depending on its core equity. So what I typically, I would say, always do not find is very intelligent is a blind obsession with let's follow what's going on in the category. And because I think sometimes that ends us taking us to the path of Theodore Levitt's famous marketing myopia, which is you tend to look at what's going on without a bigger picture of what's happening, what consumer change is happening. So, I mean, an automobile company needs to understand, are we in the business of transportation? Are we in the business of making cars? I think if you start looking at business of look in the cars, you would say, okay, my car is this, that car is that, this is this. But if someone is in the business of transportation, they would look at a bigger picture and say, hey, how are people today making choices of moving from one location to another? So, and I think that's where I was heading to with when I said the bad recommendations I feel is an obsession about following what's happening in the category, whereas not taking a bigger picture of the changes that's happening in the total ecosystem, which is resulting in consumers making different choices, which sometimes catches us by surprise.
So I agree, and this is something we say a lot to our clients, is to avoid best practice, because my view is that best practice is also known as copying, and if everyone's copying each other, then no one's marketing. But as much as I agree with you in that, how would you advise a person who's at the start of their career? Because the reflex of the person who is new is to take inspiration and advice from their peers. Whereas you're saying, which I think is fascinating, is to think, right, okay, don't think about just what's in front of you or just around you, what's the bigger picture? Where's the market going? Where's the consumer going? Where's technology going? But those kind of intellectual leaps might be straightforward for someone with your experience, but how would you encourage someone who is new to the industry to practically apply that kind of thinking?
On the contrary, Tom, I've actually found most of the intelligent leaps have come from the fresh minds in the business. Because what I see is they're not clouded with the thought of best practices, which many people who have been in the same category for a long time are subjected to. So, but at the same time, if you ask me, I think my humble opinion or suggestion would be to go back to the fundamental business of understanding, if I work in a product category, what does that try to, or I work in a service, what does that try to solve for the consumer? So is it giving them, going back to the car, a better car with better technology, or is it trying to solve the problem of transportation from them? And which fundamentally leads back to, so similarly, if someone is looking at connectivity, so the question is, are they looking at a better phone, or are they looking at better ways of communicating? So the key fundamental thing would be to go back to the consumer and understand what's the bigger business in which the brand or the company is, and then look at what are the wider aperture of options that are available for the consumers to take that, to make a choice and to solve that problem for himself or herself.
Well, and thank you for pulling out that comment to the contrary. Yes, you're absolutely right. That is also the nature of someone who's new to a situation, is they're not bogged down with the traditional arguments. So thanks for calling me out on that one. So what is the most useful thing you've bought with your own money that you use for work? So not something you expensed or got as a freebie, but you've actually spent your own cash on that has transformed the way you work?
It's not really very high tech, but I think one thing that has really helped me over the last, I would say about 5 years, is my iPad. I think it's a very simple device, but where it helps me is because in our work, right, we today, first and foremost, as human beings today, we are bombarded with information from multiple sources. So therefore, it's important for us to, first of all, figure out where we're going to get the information that will really help us, and also store it in a way that's very efficient and helps us. So I think as marketeers and as a marketeer who needs to be close to what's going on around the world. So I think we need to read a lot, and I try to spend as much time as possible reading uh, the magazines and the books and the newsfeed on multiple medium on that are available digitally to understand what's going on around and to be abreast with things that are happening in the economy, in the business world, as well as in the marketing world. So therefore, I think the iPad is like my partner wherever I am, be in office, be at home, or I'm traveling, and and it really helps me, keep up with my learning journey. And obviously, now with the things like pencil, etc., it's so very easy. It helps people like us who have in the world of pen and pencil to even write. But at the same time, there are those times when you need to let yourself down, and it with all the streaming services today, it also works as a brilliant entertainment device.
So for now, ignoring the streaming services, what are the apps or functionality of your iPad that helps you do your job better?
I would say Maxter. It has It has a good collection of the magazines that you want to read. Then obviously there are your regulars like Economist, etc., whose apps are like my go-to on a day-to-day basis. Also, Fast Company. I think it's a magazine that brings around the best of the innovation that's happening in the consumer world. And apart from that, then there are apps like Notability, great for taking notes when you want to, with capturing pictures, etc. So I would say these are the apps, and obviously Outlook.
Right. Okay. Interesting. All right. So last getting to know you question. Once again, a question that people don't want to go very near, but you've gone for it, so I respect that massively. How do you want people to remember your career?
It's a great question, but let me, before I start, one disclaimer.
Okay.
I think I've just got started, so there is a big journey still ahead. So I personally still think I'm just started, and there's a long journey to go. And I think what I would say is, on the journey that I want to go is, and that's a target for myself. So, and I link it back to my belief of people first. So I think I've realized that, somewhere in the distance that I've traveled today, and as I look forward to the distance that I need to travel as a professional, a lot of what I am today is due to the invaluable learnings that I've got from the people that I've worked with, as who have been my managers or my teammates or mentors that I've had along the way. And therefore, it is important that for me that I create an impact with the people that I work with. And so, be it in terms of the interaction that I have, or in terms of the work that we do, I really create a positive impact in their lives, with which they, and that really going back to that fundamental connection of as a human being. So that's very important. I think the second thing is, I've been very fortunate that I worked with two great organizations who are so value driven that it almost kind of shaped my beliefs and values as a human being. And that's because their fundamental business is in doing things that help people lead a healthy life and lead a better life. So I think that's something that I would like to follow for the rest of my career, in working for a business that do good by doing good, and which I want to keep doing throughout the rest of my life, irrespective of the designation of the roles. I really want to be involved in businesses that are fundamentally believe in doing, is by driving great value by doing good for the world and for the people.
And I think that leads us nicely onto your shiny new object. So we had a chat about this the other day, and your shiny new object is food tech advancement. So I think I know what that is, but for listeners who don't understand what that is, could you just give us a brief introduction to that shiny new object?
Sure. So I think, Tom, I really feel excited that I'm part of an industry which is at a time where is undergoing a host of innovations and developments that are really that are really reshaping the overall food ecosystem. So I would like to first of all, mention that this is not one thing, but I think there are multiple advancements that are happening which we can club as food tech. So let me start by saying that what are these developments that I'm talking about? I think first and foremost, I mean, you work with a platform that's again works on this newest technologies. But I think when I look at this newest technologies like AI and machine learning platforms that are coming up today, it's actually helping us understand consumer choices at a rapid speed and in micro segments, which are helping us customize solutions and food solutions that really help on this, cater to smaller needs of people. Now that can be, like we all know today, there are people who have certain issues which are coming up, which maybe a lot of years back were not so much into the news, like a gluten, like a lactose intolerance, and there are a lot of other such issues. And then these are these micro segments. So earlier it was not possible to understand who are these people, where are they, how, what are their choices, etc. I think today with the help of AI and ML platforms, we're today able to figure out these micro segments, their needs, their requirements, and then further with the advancement in food tech, we're able to come up with solutions that can talk to them. At the same time, if you look at from a product point of view, I think food science is also making a lot of progresses where we are able to take away the not so useful ingredients and yet deliver the same taste and preferences of the consumers in a great way. So I think that is a phenomenal way, and it's a continuous journey. It's not that it's a stopping. It's not that it didn't happen, but I think today we are seeing much more rapid changes that are happening, and people are able to therefore offer of things like meat alternatives, which is a great thing for people who have a certain preference. And again, the advancements on food technologies enabling them to do that. Similarly, when you talk food and specifically packaged food, what comes along with it is packaging. And with all the developments that are happening today in looking at sustainable solutions that are good for the environment, is again an integral part of food tech. So if you really look at it, what I was trying to up is there are data platforms that are helping you understand consumer choices at a much more micro level. Then there are food technologies that are helping solve those problems by coming up with alternatives that are good for the consumers, but at the same time is good for the planet. So I think those are things that really excite me as a person who works in the food industry, and the impact that we can create by offering those solutions to the consumers and helping them lead a better life. That really gets me excited, and that's what I like to keep abreast on. We try to do a little bit in our work where we do. We try to marry that and provide better solutions. But that's something that's very close to my heart and keeps me very excited.
So, as I understand what you just said, is that food tech kind of broadly covers three areas, which is consumer choices around individual requirements, allergies, and so on, the replacing of less healthy ingredients for more healthy ingredients without sacrificing experience or taste, and then finally packaging. So that's so interesting to see it broken down into those three areas. But which of those is the most important? Which of those is going to deliver the largest benefit for the consumer and the environment?
And this is not a diplomatic answer, but I actually think there is a lot more in the food tech than what I just mentioned. I just gave you three examples. I'm sure there are people around the world who are working towards much bigger problems and solutions. So I think the sum of all this is going to make the difference, because without the technology, you're not going to be able to really. So even at a data level, right, you need to understand where are the consumers, because ultimately, I think the benefit that today the data provides us is able to figure out where those consumers are and how to provide to them, which in one way we call mass customization. But I think, and then the food technology is required to deliver the product as per those requirements. And finally, we need to have packaging that is sustainable. I mean, we do not have a planet B, as it is always said.
And so what You're very close to food technology. So what are the things that are coming up in a kind of 18-month horizon that potentially a lot of the people who listen to this podcast haven't been exposed to? What kinds of things are we going to be seeing from the industry as a whole? I'm not pressing into Kellogg specifically, but what kinds of things are we going to see? I mean, certainly in the UK, we've seen the arrival of lab-grown meat. I mean, it's certainly not mainstream yet, but you're starting to see it crop up in various restaurants, certainly, and also as being advertised as a sustainable alternative to meat. So are we going to see loads of that, or are we going to start to see different changes in food science?
I think you mentioned a lot of it, Tom. I think the key thing is, food is very personal, food is very local. So there will be a lot of things that we're going to see around the world, but I think at a broad level, what I see is plant energy or energy sources coming from plant foods as one of the big things. And I'm fortunate I work for a great company that is being a pioneer in that.
So moving forward to your talk at Future, I'm not sure what day you're on, but as we said at the start, we're at the 16th or 17th of October. What are you going to be talking about at the conference? Can you give us a little sneak peek into that?
I'm a part of the panel that will be discussing how to revitalize legacy brands. So brands which have been around for a long time, how can we keep them relevant with all the changes that are happening around us and still making them the same loved brands that they always were.
Right. So what, if anyone who's listening to this podcast would like to go and see that panel, you need to go to future.today. So that's not as you say, it's spelled FUTR.today, TODAY. And you can see Sanjib Bose as well as, I think, hopefully another 4 or 5 other speakers from this podcast, but I will keep the listener updated with that information. So Sanjib, thank you so much. That was so interesting to hear about your passion for food tech, but also what shapes you as a marketer, what drives you at a intellectual and kind of on a almost daily basis, and the fact that you love your iPad as well, which is something that wasn't expected. So lots of unexpected moments in that podcast. Thank you so much. If someone wanted to get in touch with you directly, how would you like them to do that?
I have my profile on LinkedIn, which is public, so more than happy to talk to anyone on that platform.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, thanks again for dialing in. I think it's pretty late at night for you, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not too late to take a call from you, Tom.
That's very kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.